say that talk is cheap, but so is salt. In today's video, we're talking about some salty Magic the Gathering cards that are incredibly cheap to buy. Today's video is educational, it's entertainment, it's not necessarily something to take from and do, because a lot of these cards will get you punched in the face. We're talking messing with people's lands, turning off card draw in its entirety, we're talking about oppressive and brutal and nasty Magic cards, but all of them will cost you less than $3. As your friend spent $40 on a smothering tithe, why don't you f*** him for 20 cents? So grab yourself a nice cold beverage to wash the salt away as we talk about some incredibly nasty, but cheap as chips, Magic cards. Hokokori the Dust Drinker. Hokokori the Dust Drinker is a 4-mana 2/2 spirited legendary creature because lands don't untap during their controller's untap steps. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player untaps a land he or she controls. That's right, it's a 2/2 creature that can attack your opponents that basically winter orbs them. We are looking to reduce our opponent's ability to play Magic by allowing them to only untap one permanent at a time, or one land at a time. The great thing about Hokokori is you can make it uncountable with Cavern of Souls or flash it in through an Aether Vial. You can do all those sort of creaturey things and protect it with creature protection too, which you can't do with a Winter Orb. It's also a 2/2 that can carry a sword and hit people. But the great thing about Hokokori and other effects that I'm going to talk to you about in a moment is that you can break the parity of playing a stacks piece like Hokokori by playing mana rocks. Hokokori might be bad to drop if your opponents have all got Soul Rings and Command Spheres and similar in play, but if they don't and you do, you will get to untap those alongside your singular land, and thus you will be set up to play more Magic than your opponents. Not all playgroups are like this, but if yours is keen to play Magic at a really cutthroat level, there's only a finite amount of fun to be had in a game of Magic, and you can try to have all of it and let your opponents have none of it. In a similar vein, we have Rising Waters, which is the blue version of Hokokori. There's actually quite a few effects like this. I point these two out because they're both so unbelievably cheap right now thanks to reprints like the List and Commander sets. Next up, let's blow some shit up. Catastrophe says destroy all lands or all creatures. Creatures destroyed this way cannot be regenerated this turn. This card is great for its modality because you can play it as a 6-mana Wrath, which is a bit over odds, I guess, sure. But you can also, when you realise your table's a bit more cutthroat and people might be a bit more keen to it, I think it's funny, you can blow up all lands instead. It's cool to have a card that has like a normal mode and arsehole mode on the same card, because then it's basically modal. You have to change up the deck you're playing or the cards you're playing in your deck, depending on how cool your new each different playgroup is with how much of a dickhead you can be. Alternatively, you can go with Obliterate that currently has a low price of $1.92. It says it can't be countered, so it's not going to get taken off the stack by a pesky blue mage. It says destroy all artifacts, creatures, and lands. They can't be regenerated. This one's when you want to go full dickhead, when you want to really reset the game to 0. It's like Farewell, a card that I find incredibly frustrating to have played in a game of Commander because it exiles all graveyards too. It really does often reset the game to like a 0 stage, apart from the person with a handful of cards. But Obliterate says, let's say farewell to everything. Everything. Goodbye lands, goodbye creatures, goodbye artifacts. I guess Obliterate doesn't take enchantments with it because that's not really Red's wheelhouse. So you can actually, again, break parity by having a load of enchantments in play that are good. Now we come to a real favourite of mine for playing mind games with the table. Impending Disaster is a 2-mana enchantment, so it's one of the cheapest entries in this entire list of salt-inducing nonsense, and it says during your upkeep, if there are 7 or more lands in play, sacrifice Impending Disaster and destroy all lands. What Impending Disaster says is that you can only have 7 lands in play amongst all players. So if you play Impending Disaster after you've ramped and you've got 3 in play and everyone else has not, that means that you are ahead. And that does a few things. One, you've got more mana to play with than them. But B, it also means that other players are behind you and then want to reset the land count. It is a mess of a Magic card to maneuver through. The actual really wonderful part of it in terms of playing politics and mind games and a little bit of banter, to be fair, it's not even politics and mind games, it's just banter, is that when somebody at the table plays the 7th land and then passes back to you for your upkeep trigger of Impending Disaster, you can blame the player that played the 7th land. You can say that they brought it upon the table, that it's their fault, and you can bring this up multiple times throughout the game to try and get people to target them once everyone's rebuilt their mana. Impending Disaster is a little bit less brutal than Obliterate or straight up Armageddon, in the sense that you play it quite early and it only destroys 7 or 8 lands total, so you can rebuild from it a lot better. So Impending Disaster might be the card on this list that you might get away with in a more casual pod more than the others. I still think people might want to metaphorically punch you in the dick though. Mana Breach is a 3-mana blue enchantment that says whenever a player plays a spell, that player returns a land he or she controls to its owner's hands. This card is about $1, maybe $2, or the foil from 7th edition, it's $55. Old school foils are expensive, and so are friends, because this card will make you lose some. That's not why they're expensive, but I'm just telling you they're expensive before you... That was a bad joke. Mana Breach means that whenever anyone plays a spell, there is a tax on bouncing around back to their hand. It becomes this weird bouncy attrition thing that penalises players that play lots of spells and doesn't penalise players that play one-off big spells instead. So you can play Mana Breach and you can play big 7 or 8 mana spells and just put a land back into your hand and not be punished so much for it. If someone else at the table is doing spell-based combo or 2 cards a turn combo or similar, or just synergistic playing multiple spells a turn that they've cast, cantrips for example, no one wants to cast a Ponder or a Brainstorm and then put a land back into the hand, or Ramp. If you play this ahead of someone playing their Farseeks or their Cultivates, it actually undoes what the spell does in general. The other side of Mana Breach is that it stops the progress towards larger spells, because people either have to sit and bank land after land after land drops against their big fatties, their big spells, or casting spells every turn just puts you back your 1 land drop. It's a cool spell in terms of the intricacies that it does to a game. It's not a cool spell if you like having friends. The Enigma, the absolute ludicrous card that is Possessed Portal, an 8-mana artifact from original Mirroring Block from... oh shit, is the Helmet 5th Dawn or is it Darksteel? I can't remember. If a player would draw a card, that player skips that draw instead. To reiterate, it's not if you would draw a second card for your turn, or a card beyond the first card in your draw step. It is you cannot draw cards while this 8-mana fucking card is in play. It is brutal. But beyond that, at the end of each turn, each player sacrifices a permanent unless he or she discards a card from his or her hand. In essence, what Possessed Portal represents is hugely flavorful. I don't know what it is canonically within the game's lore, but it is a portal that is out of control and it's sucking shit into it. And it will only end once the entire thing is sucked in and it collapses in on itself. It is the last permanent to be sacrificed when the actual player that has it in play can't discard cards anymore. Now, of course, someone will blow it up or kill it first, but if it is left to do its business, no one is drawing cards, everyone is sacking shit or discarding shit, right down to the fact that there's nothing left in play, no lands, no nothing. Obviously, the controlling player of Possessed Portal can choose to sack the portal at the point that is convenient to them. That's where the parity gets broken. To go back to that point I always say in these videos, is that the Possessed Portal owner can sack the portal to the trigger and be like, alright guys, it's okay, it's alright, we can all start to draw cards now. Just keep a notice at the end of each turn. So if you are the dickhead putting a Possessed Portal into play because you think it's funny to piss off everyone at the table, you don't get to sack it and then draw a card in your draw step. You actually have another turn of not drawing anything. If you really want to be a dickhead, cast Possessed Portal and then the following turn cast a wheel. Everyone discards their hand and can't draw cards. Yeah, cool game. Don't do this. This one is the one that I'm like, why am I telling people about this? It is a funny Magic card that this exists, right? Like, why? Who wants to play with this card in a multiplayer situation? Not me. Next up, we're going to lead into the meme that blue is too powerful and too good. This is Boil, a 4-mana instant that says destroy all islands. The fact that it's an instant as well is very funny, because you can cast in people's end step. Beyond that, you can play a second copy of it with Boiling Seas, 4-mana sorcery, destroy all islands. That's right, we have 2 4-mana red spells that say fuck blue. And if you want to really go for it, Tsunami is 4 mana in green, it says destroy all islands. There are a load of effects like this. There is one that destroys all planes, I think it's called Flash Fires, for example. But someone used to try and play against me at FNM. I'll never forget the FNM I showed up to. It was a legacy FNM, I'm playing Mono Red Prison, and this opponent mentions that they're playing Flash Fires in their deck to fuck with me. And we play a game, or we shuffle up, and I play, I think it's Soul Island Chalice, and then Mountain the next turn to Rabble, and my opponent realises this Flash Fires that their main boarding to fuck with me specifically, because I play a lot of D&T, is not going to be good this week. Either way, if you're looking to boil people's piss, or just boil their islands, play these cards as perhaps a meme or a joke to fuck with the blue player at your table. Here's the thing, these cards are like 20 and 30 cents. If there's one big blue player at your table, and there's 3 of you that don't play much blue, how about, just for one Commander evening, for one specified game, you all plan to be playing all 3 copies, Tsunami, Boiling Seas, and Boil. I think there's probably another effect like this out there. Choke is a 3-mana enchantment that stops islands untapping. But you all play 3 copies. And you all go out of your way to shoot for it. And you all just aim to blow up islands, and only islands, multiple times. Just for a laugh, just for like a set-up practical joke, to see if the other player realises that you've done it. I know, I want to do that to some people that I know, but I'm also a weirdo. Next up is Destructive Force, a 7-mana sorcery. Big mana, big mana. What does it do? Each player sacrifices 5 lands, and Destructive Force deals 5 damage to each creature. This is a great one because you can turn smugly to the table as you cast it and everyone starts groaning, and you say, well, at least I'm leaving some lands. Yes, you're seen like a dickhead, but the moment you sleeved up Destructive Force, you were aiming to be a dickhead. So don't lean back on it, lean into it. Pedal to the metal, we're Destructive Forcing the shit out of people. 2 interesting caveats about Destructive Force. One is that it does 5 damage to all creatures, so it actually doesn't kill big fuckers. So your parity breaking moment here is to play really big creatures. That's kind of an obvious thing when you're playing red, green, probably to get this mana. But yeah, play big dudes that don't die. Also, the 5 damage can hit Stuffy Doll or like Hornet's Nest, and that can make bees and shoot your opponent in the face. These cards play very well in Destructive Force. Don't ask me how I know that. No comment. But the other great thing is that this card actually makes you sacrifice lands. And the key part to that is that normally when you blow up all lands, people's like Darksteel Citadels and Indestructible Permanents survive. Hell, they can cast the green spell that makes all things hexproof and indestructible. This doesn't give a shit. You are, even if you're indestructible, you are sacking 5 lands. Put 5 of your lands in the bin and shut the fuck up. I'm not going to go into too much detail about these 2 incredibly popular commanders, but Yuriko and Narset are currently both less than $2. I think Narset is available at TCG Average right now at less than $1. If you want to pick up any of these things, of course, you can use KustoffInc.com. You can use the code KENOBI at checkout to get 5% off your order to help support the show. But like I said, think twice about putting some of this shit in your decks if your playgroup's not going to respond well to it. Next up we have Notion Thief, which is a 4-mana 3/1 flash creature. We all know what it does. Well, if you don't, it says an opponent will draw a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps. You draw that card instead. It steals your opponent's draws off of their cantrips and their card advantage spells like Sphinx's Webs and similar. If you manage to get this in under a brainstorm, you draw 3 cards, they put 2 cards from their hand back on top of their library. If you Notion Thief someone resolving a brainstorm, that person will probably just like fucking die. Their soul will leave their body and ascend to whatever the magic equivalent of Valhalla is. Scarhalla? God, I don't remember anything about Kaldheim. Narset, Part of the Veils is a very similar card. Again, this is one that is really well known, but it makes me laugh that it's just like $1 or $2. Yeah, it's a 3-mana Planeswalker. It downticks 2 loyalty to dig 4 deep into your library and reveal a non-creature, non-land card and put it into your hand. But the important part is each opponent can't draw more cards than 1 card each turn, which means it's not a symmetrical effect. Notion Thief and Narset both keep opponents from doing stuff, but unlike Possessed Portal, it has no negative effect on you. You get to still sit there masturbating furiously while the table watches. We've really moved on from land destruction now. We're now on to stopping people from playing more than 1 spell a turn with Rule of Law. Rule of Law is an absolute classic Magic card. There is a blue version called Arcane Laboratory. There's a creature called Swan Canonist. There's a 1-mana slightly worse version called Deafening Silence. But Rule of Law simply states each player can only cast 1 spell a turn. What this does, it stops people having explosive turns where they like Soul Ring into Mana Rock, or they go like Mana Rock into another spell, so Soul Ring into a 4-drop or something. It stops people from doing spell-based combo, it stops people from casting a spell and then like copying it or protecting it. It stops people from playing a spell and someone else goes to counter it, and then the original owner of that spell can no longer counter that counter. They just can't do it. It does mean that if a spell goes in the stack and player B counters it, and player C counters player B's counterspell, player B can't react again. It gets real like rigid, hard. We've only got one thing we can do here, so make it count. One of my favourite interactions I've ever seen with Rule of Law effects, like Swan Canonist, is that if someone casts a Show and Tell, for example, if they Show and Tell Omniscience into play and you put a Rule of Law or Swan Canonist or whatever into play, the person who casts the Show and Tell has now cast their 1 spell for the turn. It looks retroactively. I had an opponent's a very, very good Magic player. We're talking like top tier Pro Tour Magic player. Cast a Show and Tell, I put in my Canonist, a Rule of Law effect, and then they go to cast another spell off their Omniscience that they put in, and I'm like, no, you've had your 1 spell. It's my turn to blow up your Omniscience on my turn now. Good, clean magic. Oppression is a 3-mana black enchantment that says whenever a player plays a spell, that player discards a card from his or her hand. Again, this is a $1 card, but the cheapest foiler version available on Card Market is a German foil for €100. If you didn't know, 7th edition foils, and 8th to a lesser extent, are worth a lot of money. If you have some 7th edition foils knocking around somewhere, A, they're gorgeous, and B, you might just be sitting on a little gold mine. Attrition plays out a lot like Mana Breach. They were both in 7th edition together. I don't actually know if this is part of a cycle. I didn't look. I could look right now, but I'm not going to. In essence, it just punishes people for playing Magic. Again, if you're playing 1 spell a turn, discard 1 card. If you want to play 2 spells a turn, you discard 2 cards. It's pretty brutal. What Attrition does allow the game to get down to is that you're drawing a card a turn and just casting it. If you can't discard a card, doesn't mean you can't play the spell, it just means that you're empty-handed. Gets everyone down to top deck, similar to like Liliana of the Veil in Modern. Attrition might be the most least saltiest card on this list. I don't know, maybe Rule of Law. Tell me in the comment section below which of the cards I've said so far do you think is most likely for you to get away with it without someone in your playgroup calling you a dickhead. And lastly on our list is Sire of Insanity, a 6-mana, 6/4 creature demon. At the beginning of each end step, each player discards his or her hand. That's right, you make a big fatty, you've still got time to fuck with your hand that you've got now, but at the end of turn we have a trigger. Once that trigger resolves, every player at the table discards their hand. You put this in for Kalia of the Vast, you're looking to get everyone to basically, if they haven't got removal then, or they're tapped out, they're just discarding it all before they to untap and use it like a Wrath of God or similar. So this card slots easily into Kalia of the Vast, because you can put it off Kalia's trigger. It's a reasonable Be'lakor card, because you can cast this, get everyone to discard their hand, and then you can draw some cards off Be'lakor. Remember though, this is an ongoing trigger at the end of every single turn, everyone is discarding their hands. Again, kind of just everyone to the top deck mode that I talked about with Oppression. It's one of those things that can make Magic exciting, but it can also bring it to a crawl in a way that people don't necessarily enjoy. Again, play this card at your own peril, because people at the table might not want to play Magic with you again. I joked earlier about violence, being punched in the face or punched in the genitals or whatever, and obviously you should never do that when someone's playing cards you don't like in a game of Magic. That's a very obvious statement, but the reason I want to end on this is this idea that actually the real result of playing dumb shit like this at a table unprepared for and not wanting to see it is that you will not get to play Magic with them again. They will exclude you from their games. They don't need you to play Magic unless you're a captive group of some kind. So don't go playing this shit at your local game store against people that aren't expecting it. Don't go playing this shit to troll people that don't want to see it. Only engage with this absolute gross nonsense, the nastiest cards in all of Magic, when you know your playgroup is up for the challenge or up for dragging the game down into the pits of a really stacksy game of Magic. That should go without saying, but I really wanted to end on that note. Let me know from the list what you think was the most saltiest of all these cards, which one of these cards would make you really scream to the high heavens, and which card on here do you think actually doesn't deserve to be on nastiest card lists. Let me know in the comment section below. I've been Vince, also PleasantKenobi on the internet. Thanks for today's sponsor. Link down in the description below as well if you want to check them out, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.